We're just going to get started. Let me introduce this session really quickly before everything. So welcome to this Codacy webinar, where we're going to discuss the importance of testing your code and having visibility over your code coverage so that your engineering team can code fearless. My name is Eloisa. I'm from the Codacy marketing team. I'm only moderating the session today, so here are your speakers. I'd like to introduce them. We have Jason and Christoph, who will be leading the discussion today and talking about why tracking and enforcing code coverage is so important, and discussing what this means for managers, developers. We have Christoph is our software engineer at Codacy, and is actually a member of, is helping us develop the coverage capabilities. And we have Jason on the product management side here at Codacy as well. So in the end, we'll show you a live demo of how coverage works within Codacy, if you've already explored it, if you're a customer, and exciting new updates on that front, followed by a Q&A where you can ask us anything. And as always, we'll offer our super cool Codacy swag to everyone who participates in the Q&A, as long as you don't do it anonymously. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Please take it away, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Eloisa, for that awesome introduction, and welcome everybody to our Codacy Coverage webinar today. Looks like we have people from all over the world, in Chile and Ecuador and UK. It's awesome. So thank you again for joining in whatever time zone you're in. Yeah, Christoph, thanks for joining me today, and Eloisa as well. We're going to talk to you about code coverage. We're going to talk about unit testing and why it's important. We're going to cover a little bit of ground on what it is, why it's important, and then we'll talk about specifically how Codacy is solving for that for those problems, right? All right, so let's get started. So first off, hold on, if I can change my screen here, there we go. When you're making code changes, how often do you feel like you're basically trying to dismantle a bomb, right? Like, what happens if you make a change and functionality stops working, right? That's not a good place to be. I know it can be stressful, especially with legacy code. Maybe not so much brand new things, but definitely as projects get bigger, as you have to dig into code that you've never worked on before and you need to make a change, you don't know what's going to happen at the end. Maybe or maybe not, that code will continue working and everything will be fine. But that's why it's so important to take the proper precautions and make sure that you're being properly protected, right? Like in this case, we've got a guy who's wearing all of the right gear. So if that bomb goes off, it's okay. Well, code is very similar, right? If you're testing your code and you're taking the right precautions, then you don't have to worry so much about that bomb going off and things not working, okay? So we're going to do a little poll. So Eloisa, if you can put up the poll, we're going to ask all the entire audience, how well do you know the status of your code coverage? How well is your code being tested today? Is it 0%? Is it 100%? Somewhere in between? Don't even know. Let's see what the results are here.
The poll is launched, so you can vote now. Of course, there's always the option of I have no idea. And let's see how many people.
Oh, I cannot vote?
No. Oh yeah, I can't vote either. Darn. We're gonna bias.
No. It's just our audience, so it's unbiased.
All right. So if you see the poll up, please click an answer. Have no idea is a perfectly fine answer as well. All right, let's see how many results we got here.
Okay, I'm going to share the results with everyone, so you should see it in your screen.
There we go. Okay, as expected, I mean, either lower than 50% or no idea, which is good. I mean, I kind of would have expected that from the audience coming to a code coverage webinar, so that makes sense. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about, today we're going to talk a little bit about what the main reasons are for why testing your code is important and how to easily measure it, right? How can you do it so that you don't have to manually, chug through all your code files and find out, is this tested, is that tested or not? That's where Codacy kind of comes in and can help you. So let's talk about what actually code coverage means. Right? It's basically a way to measure all of your code. And this is an example. This is a screenshot from the Codacy tools that show you what percentage of your code is actually being tested today. And we do that. We have Christoph, maybe you can give a little quick brief intro about like how we do that. But we basically look at your code that's being scanned as it's going through the pipeline in Git, correct?
Yeah, that's more or less the case. I didn't want to go too much detail in this stage. I wanted to do the demo, but just like an overhead view of how we are doing this is that we are we know the structure of the repository, that's the repository in question, whatever it may be, and we also get the reports for specific commits, and this way we can we understand what parts of the codes are covered. We can track that over time, show this, some pretty graphs, stuff like that. And also this means that we can show some very specific data per, for example, pull request, which might be useful for quality checking each and every one of those, just for continuous quality assurance. Which is, by the way, what this screenshot right here is. It says that this pull request has coverage that is not up to standards. It is covered in 85%, which is below the 90% gate. What is coverage variation? I'll get to that in the demo stage. Yep. Don't worry about this.
Cool. Yeah. I think that was a good, that was just a good little sneak peek about what we're going to talk about a little bit later. Let's dig in now. Where did my quote go? Oh, my quote is at the end. Okay, great. So let's talk about 9 reasons why testing code and code coverage is important. All right, let's get to number 1. So,
sorry, we have
number question. 1. We're gonna, well, let's get to the question in a minute.
Okay,
is
cool.
Branch coverage or line coverage snapshot? We'll get to that in the demo. We'll talk about that in the demo. So, number 1 reason why code coverage and testing your code is important. You want to be able to see which code and execution paths are being tested. So, as your like we talked about before, as your code base gets bigger and more complicated, it's really hard to know exactly which pieces of the code and specifically execution paths are actually being tested or not tested, right? So, Christoph, can you talk a little bit about, like, as a developer, why this is a problem?
Yeah, of course. I mean, any developer that has worked in any legacy system knows the importance of this stuff. Like, you are whenever there's like some old code or maybe code that is not of the best quality, it is always the first question I ask is whether it has tests. That is simply because if I have the tests and I know what paths exactly are tested, then I can do the changes, and if I mess something up, then I'll know that immediately. So this is basically why this is so important. It allows us to move through the code, make changes, fearlessly, to call back to the title of this whole webinar.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Let's go to number 2. So number 2 is when you have code that's being tested, I mean, it's sort of obvious, but like it points to well-written and testable code. And so by having unit tests that automatically help you write better code, because the lower code coverage is basically the result of not a lot of tests, which could mean that the code is hard to test. And on the other hand, higher code coverage is an indication that the code is easy to test. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like the more coverage you have, the easier it is to test. Therefore, it's a better, well-written piece of code. Whereas like something like spaghetti code, it's going to be hard to write tests for that. So you're probably going to have lower tests. And so then it sort of like reinforces the idea that I want to write good code to begin with.
Yeah, it is often the case that by simple act of adding a few tests to a specific like file in your project, it is like automatically made better in terms of quality, simply because you need to adjust it to make it testable. And testable code is more often than not better written and of higher quality.
Perfect. Cool. Number 3 reason, you're more likely to write unit tests if you notice that the coverage is dropping. So if you're not measuring this is more about the benefit of actually measuring your coverage, right? So if you aren't measuring it, you really don't know. Like if you didn't have a gas gauge in your car, you probably wouldn't go fill up your gas, and guess what would happen? You would run out of gas eventually, right? You need a gauge. You need to be able to see what's going on in your gas tank, so you know that, oh, I better go fill up the gas. So if you see your coverage dropping, you know, hey, I better go write some unit tests, right?
Yeah, and also on very personal notes, I personally hate numbers, seeing numbers go down. So whenever I see like, oh, in my pull requests, I reduced the like the code coverage of my project by, I don't know, 0.5%, then yeah, I'm not happy and I want to amend that immediately.
Yeah. So I think, you know, as a marketer, having metrics and having gauges to be able to see what's going on is super important. And I think as a developer, you kind of have the same thing. You need some metrics to see how your code is doing, how the performance of your engineering process is going. You know, that I think this could be one of the key metrics that most developers would want to have in their tool bag every day. To like, okay, how many tests, you know, how many unit tests do I have on my code? All right, number 4, you really want to, you know, use test coverage and unit testing as a process to enforce this testing culture by using rules, right? And this is more from a manager perspective, but also, you know, as an individual contributor perspective too. It would be nice to know if you're going out of the lane, right? Like if you're like, I need to be within 90% coverage and I'm at 70. Okay, let's get it back up to 90, right? So enforcing the rules, like don't allow code to get pushed out to your branch unless it has a unit test, unless it has a certain percentage of unit tests. Then you can enforce that as a culture for your team, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and well, I mean, enforcing a testing culture within company is quite important for the reasons mentioned previously, because code that is unit tested, or rather is testable, is usually of better quality, and I think that is something that everybody wants.
Yep, exactly. And I think as you get bigger as a company, like an enterprise with more than 100 developers, as a manager, you're going to want to, you know, use a tool or something to be able to sort of enforce. You're not going to be able to go and talk to every single person every day on the team. And so this just makes the code review process a lot easier, right? All right. This is the title of the webinar, right? Code fearless, right? You know, by having this test culture and having these tests in place, you're going to be able to code with such a higher level of confidence. If you know that, hey, I'm just going to write anything, boom, and then you push it and it tests and it says, wait a second, you just broke this thing over here. Okay, boom. Now you can have a much more seamless trial and error process of pushing code out, I think. I would definitely want to make sure that stuff is being tested properly.
Yeah, that is true. Although I have to say that ideally this running of unit tests would happen locally on the developer machine. But that being said, having this on a pipeline level and, you know, reports tracking and everything is very, very nice in terms of, as you mentioned, bigger enterprises might have difficulties with, you know, keeping everyone in check, which is why having this kind of enforcer is a good thing.
Yep, cool. All right, moving along, number 6. This is if you're a startup or a small company looking to raise money, or you're a big company and you sell to customers. I mean, this goes hand in hand. The people who are investing in you, whether they're buying your product or they're giving you money, are going to want to know that your code is, you know, well built. I can speak firsthand. You know, I have friends who did technical due diligence for some big VCs, and they would go look at a company's code before making an acquisition or making an investment, because they want to see, like, is this just, you know, a bunch of, you know, bubble gum and baling wire, or is this actually well built, solid code that can be, you know, scaled, right? And I think customers who are in banking or finance or anywhere where there's like stringent auditing requirements, I think those are also areas where it'll be crucial for you to make sure you have proper tests in place. So, all right, number 7, code coverage could lead to refactoring. Hey, funny enough, if you're actually testing things and you realize that it could point out areas of the code base that are good candidates for refactoring from the time when, you know, your first features of the product were designed. So if you're a startup, you're building stuff, you're geared to move fast. You're not going to take the time to write all of the tests that you should be writing, because you're you're erring on the side of speed at that point. But later on down the road, as you start to add tests and get things back into place, you can see by measuring your coverage, you'll be able to quickly find out like, oh shoot, there's a whole area of my application that's not even being tested right now. And oh, by the way, that was when we started the company, and now we should probably refactor that because it's not written very well. Again, this kind of goes back to one of the previous points we talked about by having test coverage, it sort of indicates a well-written piece of code. So
yeah, definitely. And it's while everything you said is completely true, that this can show the holes in your code, I just want to reiterate that a simple act of just writing unit tests could lead very well to refactoring and making your entire code base better. So yeah, it's like two birds with one stone.
Perfect. Go to number 8. We're almost through the reasons here. So number 8 is observability. You can verify that tests are actually being executed. So without code coverage, it's hard to know if your tests are being executed at all and whether you have covered all the code or not. So kind of redundant a little bit from what we've talked about before, but I think just having that view and having visibility of like, okay, I've got 100 apps in my portfolio and I've got a whole bunch of people working on various stuff. You can quickly just look across and go, okay, 40%, 60%, 80%. You'll have a nice sort of bird's eye view dashboard of all your projects and being able to see, whether you've got proper test coverage or not without having to go dig into each file.
Yeah, it is very useful to have this kind of view on the organizational level, but this aspect is also quite valuable on like developer level, on the pull request level, simply because I have heard of cases where people actually found bugs in their like tests running environments simply because they took a look at the coverage reports and have seen that, oh, actually this thing I have just tested, those tests are not being run at all. And then, they dug deep, found issue with their like build system, stuff like that. So this kind of stuff is useful in most unusual places sometimes.
Cool. All right. And last but not least, I think while we're all here, we want to create a product or an application that has the best user experience, and we want our customers to be happy, right? So if you're testing your code and you're measuring how much coverage you have, you are much more likely to produce a product that is going to work the first time, it's going to have good user experiences, and you're going to avoid customer frustration. So I mean, the ROI on that is off the charts, right? I would hate to have to produce something that is constantly failing and breaking and having customers, call up our support team and drive our support team crazy because things aren't working. So all right, now hopefully that was all clear. And I want to leave this part of the presentation with a quote from Andrew Hunt. If you don't know him, he wrote the book Journeyman to Master and a bunch of other books. He's a pragmatic programmer. The tools amplify your talent. The better your tools and the better you know how to use them, the more productive you can be. When I see this quote, I think of a carpenter, or I think of a construction guy or girl who, they're very talented. They have lots of tools, and without those tools, like, you can be a bad construction person or a good construction person, but if you use your tools properly and you have the right tools, you can be a great one. And I think that's sort of an underlying metaphor that Codacy has here. Like, we're providing you a platform, a solution to help you improve your code quality. We're helping you improve your code coverage. So now that we've taken you through the reasons why testing code and code coverage is important, let's talk about how Codacy can help make this super easy for you. Codacy Coverage is part of the bigger product called Codacy Quality. It's our solution that helps developers fearlessly build clean, healthy, secure code from the start. So, Christoph, will you take this over now and show us how Codacy Coverage works? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And by the way, if anybody has any questions during the demo session or at any point, please use the Q&A box in there, and we'll try to answer it at the end of the session for sure. And maybe we can jump in and answer some of the stuff in between as well.
Okay, so I have to start off with a classic question of, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Then I'll be taking you guys through the new section in the quality product, which is coverage. And yeah, I'll be doing that on the basis of one of our own projects, actually. So, it's a living project. You'll get to see like stats over time, as you can see right now. But for now, I'll take you through it step by step. So once you go into the project, in a specific, once you go to a specific repository in an organization, the first thing you would see coverage-wise is this screen, which is a dashboard. And here you can see your coverage data over time. So in this case, I have data over last 3 months, and you can see that we came from like 20% to 40%, which is still not our goal, which is 60%, as you can see here. But we are getting there slowly but surely. Yeah. So what do we have here? We have this evolution, which I already talked about. We have information about coverage for the entire repository for the branch that is selected here, which is master branch in this case. And also some general information about the amount of files without coverage, below coverage, above coverage, but the most importantly, information about our goal, which we set for ourselves a goal of 60. This can be modified to whatever you want. But for us, this is what we decided on.
And you can see that on the chart as well, right? With that top line, I think the dash line at the very top. So
yeah,
three
exactly.
lines on this chart, right? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. You can see the points in time, and those points are specific commits that have been made to the master branch. You can see the trend line, how we are trending over time, and the quality goal is right here. This gray line. Yeah. So for dashboards wise, this is it. We can also go to, let's go to the open pull request. Why not? You can click on specific pull request right here, but you can also go here on the sidebar. And
hey, Chris,
here,
there's a question about this area here, I believe, and maybe you can address this.
Right.
Paula asked, when using trunk-based development, is it possible to use a PR process or the PR process to measure coverage deviation between feature branch and main? Example, whether the PR of a feature branch is adding or decreasing the coverage of a main branch since prod builds. And I think that's really what we're showing here, right? This variation.
Yes, exactly. And this is what we referenced earlier and on this image that I told I would be talking about the demo, and here it is. Here is now is the time. And yeah, this is the PR branch that is on the provider, but we know it's as Codacy that this exists. And given that we receive a coverage report for this specific commit, we can then calculate diff coverage and coverage variation. And what are those two things? Diff coverage is essentially a metric of how much of this commit, or rather of this PR, is covered by tests. Just so you have an idea of of whether you personally need to add a bit more tests to make sure your work is properly tested. But there's also a metric of coverage variation, and coverage variation is a metric of how does your coverage of overall coverage increase by this PR. So in this case, this last PR says that it is 78% covered by tests, and also it increases overall coverage of this project by 0.234%, which is completely fine because this is a big project, so it is not unusual to see like increases this small. But it is about the increase over time. I hope that answers the question, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. There was one other question on PRs. Is are calculating coverage just on the code in the PR, or the coverage as it compares to the entire repo?
Sorry, I need to read that again.
Are you calculating it on the code in the PR, or I think it's based on the whole repo, right?
Are you calculating coverage or just on the code in the PR or the coverage as it is compared to the entire? We are doing both. Those are the two metrics. Diff coverage it considers only the code that has been changed in the PR, and coverage variation relates how does how do the changes in this PR relate to the entirety of the repo, which is why coverage variation is so small, because in the grand scheme of things, this is a small change. And diff coverage is big because it is a metric of how well are we testing this particular piece of code.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that answers that.
Okay, so let's go into one of those PRs. Why not? Yeah, and here we get a bit more details. First of all, we get an understanding. Actually, we got that understanding even earlier, like right here, this check mark on the left. But here we also get an understanding that this pull request is up to standards. This is great. This information would also be sent to the pull request in question as a comment, or no, as a GitHub annotation. Sorry, it would be a comment if you were using something else than GitHub, so Bitbucket, GitLab, stuff like that.
Yeah, worth pointing out that we support all the major Git providers: GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, right?
Yeah, and also just to point out that you can also see this data from the space of your provider. You don't really need to leave if you don't want to. If you want to have this data handy, which is quite handy for the developers.
Yeah.
But yeah, in any case, for the PR, we have specific files that has been changed. We get an understanding of the coverage variation for each of those, and also of total coverage for those, compared to the branch that we are merging into, of course. Yeah, here we can see the specific data for the commits. There, in this case, there's not that many commits, but it could be more. We could have more data over time here.
Hey, Christoph, Bella had a follow-up question. He said, what about the function level coverage on the scenario that you explained earlier? So function level coverage.
Function level coverage.
I mean, when you do a pull request, it's just going to analyze the pull request, whatever is in there. So if you're modifying just a function, then it'll analyze that. If you're modifying more, then it'll analyze all of it, right?
Yeah, I guess. Honestly, I would need to understand this question better in order to answer. Yeah. What is meant exactly by the function level coverage?
Okay, so we'll wait to see if he can.
Just please, I would appreciate a clarification in the meantime, but if you don't mind, for now, let's just carry on. But we'll get back to that for sure. And actually, maybe this will answer your question. If not, then please do clarify. But we are in Codacy, we are doing line by line hits, as in we understand which lines of the code are being hit by tests and which are not. So this is the way we are calculating stuff in general. Maybe that answers your question. If no, then we'll get back to that. What else could I show you? Commits we kind of touched on simply by showing this screen. We could go inside of this. No, nothing interesting there. One thing that I briefly mentioned earlier and I can show now is that all of the goals are configurable. So we can just go to settings, go to
by the admin of the
yes,
not
of
by
course.
anybody. I'm gonna change my goal today. I'm feeling like 50% today.
Yeah, just to make that clear, this is yeah, and there's really not much to say about this. You can simply change those values and make sure that the quality gates are what you want them to be in your company. I don't know.
Can you show the overview for admins, like when they're looking at all repos across the board? How do I see whether one repo is good or bad?
Yeah. This is actually what Jason mentioned during the presentation, is that sometimes people want to get an overview of the entirety of the organization, and this is also something that we support, not only for coverage but for all the metrics that we have. So issues like quality issues, complex files, duplication issues, and of course coverage, which is what we are talking about today. And here you can see that for our 11 repositories that we have connected to Codacy, this is the overall kind of coverage average. So average coverage average is 30%. not great, I know, but I think you feel me seeing the poll answers. But
But you
we are
got an
doing our
average
best.
grade. You have an average quality grade of an A. That's pretty good.
Oh, I mean, yeah, of
You're an
course.
overachiever, Christoph.
But coverage-wise, could be better. Definitely could be worse. I have seen worse for sure. But yeah, well, just going back to what we wanted to say, the overview view is also available. And yeah, maybe last one thing. That's one last question that you might have is, how hard is it actually to set this up? And the answer is not at all. While I won't do it like live for time's sake, I'll just walk you step by step through it. This is some random repository that I just has no coverage, and what we need to do essentially is just set those two variables in your pipeline, and then simply add this also to your pipeline. And now, magically, your test coverage reports will be arriving in Codacy. We'll be able to connect everything, send you reports, do whatever else we want to do with them. And also,
Christoph, what languages does Codacy support? Or how many, I should say?
I'm pretty sure that is somewhere in the documentation. I don't have this from the top of my head. From the top of my head, I can say a lot.
Well, so for quality, we talk about over 40 languages and languages.
Yeah.
That should be the same for coverage, right?
Yeah, pretty much. For coverage, it is even simpler. While I have no 100% confidence if we would be able to process coverage reports for the languages that we do not support for quality. I am not 100% sure of that. But in theory, it should be possible because it is essentially just taking the code from the repository and then matching lines with the coverage report that we are getting, and then providing you with the intelligence that we can.
Cool. And the formats that we support on coverage for those test code files, all of the different testing tools.
I mean, there's also, my answer is a lot. I have yet to see a format that we do not support, but the full list again is in documentation. I am confident of that.
Perfect.
So
yeah,
if you don't mind, I would like to redirect you to the docs. Maybe some helpful elf can link those in the chats or something.
Yeah,
but still, we have this well documented.
Cool. So in the meantime, we have a question for the follow-up question from Bala. He said, typically classes, this is regarding the function level coverage scenario. So typically classes have multiple functions, and in languages like Java, you are able to add annotations that will allow for test code to determine if that function path is executed at runtime. Example, default params are validated in the unit test, but not optional. This is useful, especially for backend testing with databases.
If you don't mind, I need to read that again, just so I'm sure I understand.
You're able to see the question on your side?
Yes.
Okay.
My answer to that is, if whatever tool that we are using to produce coverage report will be aware that this is being hit by a test, then we will also know that. I know that this is a very generic answer, but honestly, this kind of seems like a specific case, and I would rather give you a generic answer than a wrong one. So apologies. But if feel free to reach out. I'm sure we can figure this out after offline.
Yep. And then Jake asked a question, how does Codacy know where to look for the reports? Can you support combining reports across multiple test directories in a project?
Okay. So I think let's take it like question by question. So how does Codacy know where to look for the reports? Well, the short answer is that our script is maybe kind of smart is like, I don't know, wrong way of saying that, but it kind of knows where to expect the repositories, and it just looks through the repositories, sees a format that it understands, and says that clearly this is a coverage report, and then it's, you know, changes the format to what we understand, send this over to us, and then we can just process it. But that being said, if for some reason we encounter some issue with finding that, it is also possible to just provide the path directly. And to answer your second question, like, can you support combining reports across multiple test directories in project? As far as I know, yes, because we support partial coverage reports. So you can send, like, for example, 5 different coverage reports that we will then combine on our side.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Christoph, for answering those. Is there anything else we should show? I mean, honestly, like, the demo is pretty short because it's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple functionality. We scan your code and we provide a dashboard. We also provide, I don't know if you have it if you have it handy, but we also provide it in the Git experience for the developers to see as you're, you know.
Oh, no, I don't have that handy, but that's a shame because that would be very, very useful. But
okay.
There are examples of that in the docs. So if anybody is curious, then by all means, just take a look there. But yeah, I should have prepared that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Cool. So we have a few more minutes if you guys want to ask any other questions. I think we have. Okay, we got one here. Let's see, could you please repeat the embedding of the lines you did show us? Repeat the embedding of the lines you did show us. I think the setup embedded the curl script that you had shown during the setup process. I think that's what they mean. Please repeat the embedding of the lines you did show us.
Oh, I was muted. Could you please clarify? I would hate to show you something you didn't ask for, so I would appreciate if you could reiterate.
All right, we'll wait for Isra. By the way, while we're waiting, so Eloisa, was there anything else you wanted to cover on the admin side for attendees? But were we going to give away swag?
Yeah, this is a great reminder that if you participate in our Q&A, like from right now, you know, we'll know who participated, and I'll get back to you by tomorrow with a really cool link that you can use to redeem Codacy swag. So do ask us any questions you have, and we're happy to answer. We're happy to give you swag.
Very cool.
And in the meantime, we go to clarification. Then yes, of course, I can repeat that. It is a very simple 2-step process. Okay, maybe 3-step process if we want to, you know, be nitpicky. But the first thing you need to do is to set up the token and the URL. In this case, please disregard that. I am on our development environment. But yeah, in any case, just set up those 2 values in your pipeline. So in whichever step you have test coverage reports, you will be able to access those, and then simply run this line. It will get our coverage reporter, run it, and it will simply know where, as I mentioned earlier, it will know where to look for the coverage reports, and it will get them to us. So, you know, we can process them, gather them, make some useful data for you out of them. And then once you do that, there is this first step that I said that if you wanted to be nitpicky, this is a 3-step process. And the first step is to test your integration. So you can kind of send a dummy report just to see if your integration is working correctly. But that's really it. That's really it.
Cool. I don't see any other questions in here, but if there are, please answer or please ask them. We'll go ahead and address those. But just wanted to take the time to make sure everybody knew that you can get this for free. You can do a free trial at codacy.com. Just sign up for quality, Codacy quality, and you'll have access to Codacy coverage as well. So here's another question. So API-based URL is an example URL of the or the actual URL.
Oh, I wanted to be all nice and show the presentation, but I need to go back.
Now go back.
Yes, one moment. Sorry, Codacy API base URL. This is the variable that was asked about, right?
Yeah, is the API base URL, is that an example? Or the actual?
I mean, this is an actual URL, but it is also a kind of dummy URL, simply because in reality, this would be app.codacy.com. As I said, just in order to show you this really quickly, I went to our development environment. So this points to our development environment, but in general, this would point to real Codacy. So app.codacy.com.
Are you sharing your screen, Christoph?
Oh, I should be, but
you forgot to ask,
I'm not.
Can you see my screen?
I did not. Give me a sec. Yeah,
right,
now I'm definitely sharing my screen.
Yeah, I can see it now. Okay. Good.
Yeah. So sorry about that. Hopefully I did answer your question. I can show you it right here if you would like.
Okay, and then we do have a couple of other questions here. So this is from Anonymous. We are starting to unit test on a legacy project with lower than 10% of coverage. Do you have any advice of how we should start? Sign up for Codacy Coverage.
I mean, definitely a good way to start is to just do small increments. So, an improvement is better than no improvement. So even though I can imagine that kind of legacy projects are usually, might be a bit tough to test, it is good to just, start digging in. And even if it's just one file at a time, it is always good to just try and make an increase. And also, yeah, it is also very good to track it. So, feel free to hop onto the Codacy. But
there's a really big shoe company that created a logo and a brand or a tagline called "Just Do It," right? Nike. So just got to start.
Yeah, that's true. It is often very often painful, especially at the beginning, to just start doing tests, because if the app is tested, is written in such a way that it is hard to test, then the first steps are always hard. But it gets easier over time.
Yeah. Cool. Next question. Do you have integrations with GitHub and GitHub Actions, like interactions on the PR timeline with the results?
Yes, we do. In GitHub Actions, actually, I'm not 100% sure about GitHub Actions. I think we do, but I am not certain, so we would need to double check that somewhere in the background. But yes, we do have integration with GitHub and GitHub annotations. So whenever there is a coverage report, we actually send the results to the PR in question. So you open a PR, we have a coverage information. We get back to the PR itself, just to post information like, yeah, this is up to standards, or it is not up to standards. What is the variation? What is the diff coverage? Essentially a summary of the results that can be relevant for the engineering question.
So it doesn't require GitHub Actions to work, right?
As far as I know, no, it doesn't. Yeah, as long as you're sending the coverage reports in your pipeline, you should be good to go.
Yeah, so that's a good thing, because I think GitHub Actions will cost you more money, right? So being able to do this cheaper, it's a good thing. All right, so next question we have from Ryan. You mentioned earlier that only admins are able to update coverage gate percentages. From experience, it seems linked to GitHub admins. Only GitHub admins can update permissions on Codacy Coverage. Do you have any plans to expand the user permission capability so users who are not GitHub Actions can optionally have access to update Codacy permissions?
I personally have no idea, mostly because this particular aspect of the project was not my responsibility. But I'm sure we can understand if that's the feature that we are planning or not. and
But
get
is
back
that
to you.
is that true though? So like the permissions in Codacy are directly linked one-to-one to your permissions in GitHub?
As far as I know, yes, we are mostly taking all the information that we can from the provider, and the permission level is one of those things.
Yeah, so our product team and the people responsible for like new features and functions will definitely take this into consideration for sure as we kind of move forward. So good feedback. Love to. I think we have probably a request form or something for feedback, and we'll definitely take this out of the webinar and bring this to them as well. But thanks for bringing that up. Sounds like you definitely want some more granularity as far as user permissions go. That's an interesting use case though. So I guess as a GitHub admin, you have superpowers and you want to sort of give some of those superpowers to other people, but not all of them, right?
Yeah. I can totally see that being useful. Very nice feature. That would be a very nice feature.
So a team lead basically who needs to coverage gates, but not necessarily like full superpower of GitHub repos. Right? Okay, cool. Yep, sure. I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. We covered that one? Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, unless there's any other last minute questions, Eloise is gonna look for some people to send swag to. That's gonna be awesome. Hopefully put my name on the list because I definitely want some Codacy swag. I haven't gotten it yet. And thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Unless you guys have any other things to add here, I think we're at 50 minutes, so that's not bad. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, there's just one thank you message in the Q&A. Thank you also, Bala. Yeah, I'd just like to say that if you do take like 1 extra minute to answer the survey that's going to pop up at the end of this webinar, you'll help us and everybody by giving feedback on this webinar. Was it useful to you? You can also send follow-up questions and tell us if you're interested in learning more. So yeah, and you can also get some swag from giving us your feedback as well. But that's all I had to say. So, and also again, thank you everyone for coming and for listening and for asking so many questions today in the Q&A. Love to see all the curiosity, and I think it was really cool to see the product live. And so we'll see you at the next webinar. I'm gonna just post this link in the chat. You can keep up with Codacy on Twitter or LinkedIn to find out about the next webinar, or to ask us any questions maybe you forgot to ask. Feel free to find us.
Maybe we'll see you guys in Berlin in a week at We Are Developers. We'll be there as well. So
yeah, let me see if there's anyone here from Europe. Okay, not in the chat, but if you're around in Berlin, in Europe, and if you're attending the We Are Developers World Congress, we'll be there. Hall A, booth A60. If you want to come meet us, get some extra swag and grab a free coffee, a free drink, and just chat with our lovely engineering team. We'll be there and we're happy to see you. So hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christoph.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.